Welcome to Money Matters. I'm Zahir Kelvin Ong Abdullah, and we're coming to you from Kuching because we have a very special guest in our studios today, the Premier of Sarawak, Tan Sri Abang Johari. Tan Sri, welcome to Money Matters, and thank you for being on our program.
It's my pleasure.
As a Sarawakian myself, it is an honor to have you with us. So can I start off by asking you that Sarawak's revenue for 2022 was 11.9 billion ringgit. So looking ahead and looking forward, how do you plan to sustain this or even improve the revenue for Sarawak?
Yeah, let me share with you the background. I took over as head of the state government in 2017. And what I did was I launched the digital transformation of Sarawak's economy, giving emphasis on digitalization, meaning we go towards digital economy. Then 2021, we had our COVID-19 problem. But before that, I had managed to diversify our economy, not entirely depending on manufacturing, but rather we restructure what I call revenue re-engineering. In other words, to explore other avenues to raise fund and to get that fund as a stimulant to the other sectors of the economy. So what happened was, through that restructuring exercise, and in the year 2022, we managed to have 11.9 billion revenue to the state coffers. The game changer was when I imposed the sales tax. Because under the Constitution, the state has the right to impose sales tax. And that has been agreed when we formed Malaysia under the Malaysian Agreement. So that was the game changer, though I had to face a lot of opposition, even to the extent of going to court. And the High Court decided in our favor. Though that is the game changer in our revenue restructuring through sales tax. And of course, sales tax did not only cover oil and gas, but the other export commodities, as long as it goes out of Sarawak borders and export to international market. That is the reason why I managed to get quite a handsome sort of revenue to Sarawak coffers.
Yes. So, looking at what you mentioned about the digital economy, because Sarawak is very vast and very big.
Yeah.
So how do you ensure that Sarawak is covered with digital economy?
Yes, 2017, 2018, we have our long-term digital plan that covers 2018 to 2022, where we have to build the basic infrastructure, or what we call the backbone of digital economy. That's where the Sarawak government has to invest quite a huge amount of fund to cover areas that are accessible to internet connectivity. And there are, of course, still black spots, but we have identified certain spots, certain areas, particularly the industrial area, where the economic activities are there for us to connect them to the digital infrastructure, including 5G. And in this context, we collaborate with MCMC, with the federal government fund and our fund. We managed to build our towers, infrastructure towers. And thank God it is doing quite well.
Okay, now looking at the numbers which you mentioned is now 11.9B and all that. So looking forward, do you think this would grow even further?
Yes, it is part of our plan to. What is important is you have to have a revenue base, the sectors that will give you fund. And in other words, you have to broaden your economic base, diversify your economy. And in this regard, I have a feeling that once our economy has improved, giving emphasis to manufacturing and also resource-based products for export, then ultimately the revenue will be there through the sales tax.
Understood.
So that's why I'm very confident with that.
Okay, it's good to know. Now, Tan Sri, you have put in place a post-COVID-19 development strategy 2030. So looking at these key areas, what would your progress be in terms of achieving this program?
This COVID-19, post-COVID-19, I call it development strategy towards the year 2030. Actually, it's a long-term policy where I have engaged with the private sector as well as the public sector. And it must be anchored on three important pillars. Number one is economic prosperity. I mean, your economy must grow. Number two is social inclusivity, meaning the benefit be across the board.
Right.
It is community-based. Number three is environmental sustainability. And sustainability is very important in view of what's happening around you. Climate change is one of the global issues. And we have to tackle this issue while at the same time there are opportunities in this transition plan from, fossil fuel to green energy. And Sarawak is blessed with the resources as an enabler for you to achieve what has been targeted in 2030 post-COVID strategy.
So renewable green energy is your main focus in terms of pushing this forward?
Yes. Yeah. In this case, I think you have to explore how to really play your role in this transition plan. That's why I started with hydrogen economy, because hydrogen is the energy for the future, and you have Sarawak has the feedstock for you to produce hydrogen. And that is a clean energy acknowledged by the world. And also, as you know, even the financial instrument now is very much dependent on your ESG. So your policy must be adjusted so that you got all the ecosystem in place for you to move forward, because market is small for Sarawak. If for that matter, Malaysia is small market. You have to depend on the external market. For instance, ASEAN is the market for you, and also EU and US.
Right. Tan Sri, hold that thought. We've just got to go for a very quick commercial break. So stay with us. We'll be back with more with the Premier of Sarawak, Tan Sri Abang Johari. Welcome back to Money Matters. We're talking to the Premier of Sarawak, Tan Sri Abang Johari. And as you can see, Tan Sri, you were talking about climate change. You can see the weather has taken a turn. Now it's raining heavily. But Tan Sri, moving on, can we talk about what the Prime Minister, Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim, said in January this year, calling Sarawak an ASEAN tiger, and especially looking at the Sarawak's economic growth. So looking at these, two questions for you here. What are the key factors in terms of moving on for Sarawak's success? And also, when do you think Sarawak can achieve developed state status?
Yeah, to answer your first question, it is a question of policy direction. And your policy must be based on the available resources that we have, particularly in terms of comparative advantage. In this respect, you're talking about climate change. Now people are tackling climate issues where, the emission of carbon is one of the causes of what's happening now globally. So what I do was I did certain studies on this, and I find that you must have certain policies to mitigate the issue of carbon emission, number one. Number two is to reduce the global temperature. And my study, I see that Sarawak has the resources to mitigate carbon emission, while at the same time to contribute to climate management. We got the forests, we got the other resources that we have, especially biodiversity. And if you combine these two, then you can, what we call, involve in carbon storage. You store your carbon, and there is a carbon footprint there. And then you are involved in this new carbon trading. What I'm saying is this: Sarawak has to go towards the new economy, which is basically based on sustainability. And in that area, I think for long-term interest of Sarawak, for that Malaysia, we have this direction that we have to adopt. And there are a lot of opportunities for us to transform towards the new economy. I think because of that, maybe the Prime Minister mentioned that Sarawak is a new tiger or ASEAN tiger towards economy. But I must share here that when we start the initiative to have our what we call hydrogen economy, I was invited to share the views in Rotterdam as well as in Japan on the importance and significance of correct policy that will sustain the environment through hydrogen economy. Because even I'm using hydrogen car, that will become eventually the mode of public transport. And that will, benefit a lot in our transition plan.
Right. So, looking at the target to achieve developed state status, Tan Sri?
Yes, by 2030, as you know, we were recognized by World Bank as a high-income state. We have achieved the GNI per capita within the World Bank standard, meaning. I thought that I would be achieving that target by the year 2030, or the earliest is 26 or 27. But now we are within that category now. What is important is to sustain that position as an income state. The next is GNI per capita. We have to redistribute this income to the population through various strategies in order to raise the household income. And that is where talent development is important. new industries has to be initiated, and also we have to be aggressive in petrochemical.
Right.
And that will give certain avenue of income to our local people, not forgetting agriculture.
Right.
Agriculture has to be smart agriculture or precision farming. And that will involve the use of technology. So within 7 years, I have confidence that we are going to be successful in this transition program through our educational system. You must remember this one is linked to our education. And the Sarawak government has set up 5 international schools which caters for eligible students who are smart,
Right.
irrespective of whether they are from rural or urban areas. As you know, international school sometimes is for elite.
Yes.
But for Sarawak, we give free education in international school using Cambridge curriculum as a basis that will allow our smart children from the rural community of B40 to pursue this education. At least you have a group of students who are good in English, even good in Mandarin, because we recognize UEC.
Yes.
And then good in mathematics and good in science. That will transform our economy.
Tan Sri, we just got to go for our final commercial break, so hold that thought. I'll come back to you with more questions. So stay with us on Money Matters. We're talking to the Premier of Sarawak. Thank you for staying with us on Money Matters. We're coming to you from Kuching, Sarawak, and we're here with the Premier of Sarawak, Tan Sri Abang Johari. Now, Tan Sri, can we talk about racial unity? As you know, Sarawak has always been a perfect example of racial unity, so much so that other states are saying that they should emulate Sarawak. So, looking at this, how does it help in terms of growing the economy in Sarawak?
Yes, we are very fortunate that Sarawakians having this understanding even before Malaysia. And unity is very important amongst us. And in Sarawak, we have a lot of mixed marriages. Chinese marry Malays, Malays marry Iban, Iban marry Chinese, and so on and so forth. So over generation, the understanding among us is very, very solid. It's like family type of understanding. As I said, you touch one, you touch the rest. So that is how solid is our understanding, and also respect to each other's culture. I used to share my view that when you have mixed marriage, you have hybrid Sarawakian. So when you talk about hybrid, this is where Sarawak is there. And with this unity and understanding, you create stability. Once stability is there, leaders can move forward because everybody has a stake in the growth of our economy. That's why when people refer to Sarawak, to us, There's no difference in our racial background, religious belief. Malay Muslim can eat in a Chinese shop as long as halal. You can use chopstick. It doesn't, give any impression. And for Sarawak itself, as you know, we recognize the use of Allah by the other religion, because the close proximity between our people at the border, Indonesia is using that. So, we are not a theologian, but from the theology perspective, this is a question of Arabic language against our language. So that, as far as Sarawak is concerned, is not an issue.
Not an issue.
So when you have united people behind you, of course it gives something to the way how you run the country. Right. And the country can only prosper when your economic policies are in place.
Right. So Tan Sri, you can say that I'm a product of a mixed marriage, so I'm a hybrid Sarawakian.
Yeah, even a lot of people like you, a lot. Yeah. And then, mixed marriage, it is a question of understanding. You cannot stop people in love, Yeah. You can't. So you just allow it, as long as there is understanding. As I said, during the wedding, the Malays attend the tea ceremony. And then the Chinese will attend the akad nikah ceremony. So you understand both cultures. So you converge.
Yes.
I mean, that's life.
It is. So Tan Sri, moving on to decentralization. So Sarawak now has the authority to implement federal projects of up to 50 million within the state, which appears to be a clear testament of the federal government's faith in Sarawak. But do you think, are there any areas or sectors that you deem necessary for the federal government to shift its focus to give Sarawak more decentralization?
This is based on our Malaysian Agreement 63. All the devolution of power from central to the state is based on what is written in our Malaysian Agreement, and we are pursuing that. I would like to thank the federal government for giving authority to decide on project below 50 million. That is the right way to cut off bureaucracy. And this idea I proposed to the Prime Minister when we formed the Perpaduan government. I said, Sarawak, or for that matter, our friend from Sabah, we need this arrangement. What happened before was this. You got a project meant for Sarawak, but you cannot implement it because of this bureaucracy. The moment you approve it, it will be in October. But it's the end of the year. So you cannot implement that project. And as a result, there should be a new mechanism in terms of allowing the local to implement certain project. Okay, below 50, we are okay. Actually, a lot of our rural project, clinics and schools, below 50. And then you have good quality buildings, schools, and clinic in the rural areas. And this is the key. The rest is economic project is different. But these facilities must be enhanced in our rural areas.
Right. So it's interesting that you mentioned rural areas, Tan Sri, because again, earlier we talked about the vastness of Sarawak, and Sarawak has a very huge rural area. So looking at the programs, are you confident that the programs you have will uplift the well-being of the rural areas?
Yes. You must know there are two sides of the story. One is the federal project. The other one is the state project. I have formed 10 development agencies. And I also, on the state level, give authority to them. I give one agency 1.5 billion ringgit project, each agency. And they can implement it within a period of 3 years. And there are 10. For instance, Upper Rajang Development Agency is Google areas in Rajang, Baram, Highland, We want to develop the highland in Baram area, just an example. But there are 10 now. So in other words, the federal also give devolution of power to us, Sarawak, and the state government also giving power to the regional agency. That will be able to penetrate the area that must be developed so that the income level, as I said, the home, call this income level of the rural people will increase.
Right.
And the economic activities can run.
Right. Tan Sri, final question before we go. Let's talk about what you mentioned about the carrier, the Sarawak Boutique Airlines that is coming up. The state government has taken over MASwings. So looking forward, what would the next steps be of making sure that we have an airline for Sarawak?
Well, negotiation is on now. There is a special task force committee headed by the Minister of Transport Federal and our Minister of Transport in the question of issue of taking over MASwings. But I also want 2 conditions to be fulfilled. One, due diligence. We want take MASwings a clean slate. Number 2, the rules must be regional. At the moment, MASwings also fly within Sarawak and Sabah. That's not what we want. We want a regional airline, but small and boutique in nature. And that will give another infrastructure to people to come to Sarawak. And also to stabilize the fare. Our problem is the fare. When festive season, you can see, even Asia also coming up the fare. So that's not the right way for you to manage the connectivity between Peninsular Malaysia and Sarawak. So my objective of having a line, beside to explore new markets for the tourists to come, is to stabilize the fare.
Right. So looking at tourism, since you mentioned about tourism, you were the tourism minister before.
Yes.
So you've talked about the growth of economy. So will tourism still be a very important factor for Sarawak?
Of course, services sector is important. Not only for you to see the flora and fauna, but also medical tourism. I must say here that we got a lot of foreign patients coming over here, and they are referring to our private hospital. So there are few new private hospitals coming up, and Nusantara just next door. You can see the migration of Indonesian to this part, and you have to enhance the connectivity between the 2 areas. I think the future is there.
Okay. Tan Sri, thank you very much for being on Money Matters. It's been a pleasure and an honor having you on our program.
Thank you very much.
So thank you for staying with us. We'll be back next week with more money insights that matter. I'm Zahir Kelvin Ong Abdullah. Stay safe.